Hello again, Rick Techies. Welcome to the only podcast that helps employers and recruiters connect with more candidates through technology, inspire conversations. Attracting talent through recruiting technology is changing rapidly, and that's why this show exists. This episode is another vendor edition for you. This podcast is sponsored in part by HR Lancers, the Upwork for HR. If your company is looking for recruiting or HR help on a part-time or contract basis, go to hrlancers.com to post a project or a job, or even browse the available freelancers looking for work right now. It's free and easy. Again, hrlancers.com. All right, so the Great Resignation is underway. Recent news shows that Americans are leaving their jobs at the highest rate in more than 2 decades. I think one story I read said about 4 million people quit their jobs in April. And so with companies everywhere just eager to hire and the weight of job security lifted, employees are upping their standards and looking for greener pastures. That spells challenges, of course, for employers out there. Companies to need to up the ante, not only to keep their top talent, but to attract those in search of a company that meets their post-COVID caliber of work. So here to discuss that and more is the aforementioned Shane Metcalf from 15five. Hey, Shane, great to have you and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Chris. Really good to be here.
Excellent. First, tell us, what does 15five do? I've heard the name out there and seen your company name around, but give us a quick rundown.
Yeah, sure. So 15five is a human-centered performance management platform that really helps organizations develop successful managers and unlock peak performance. And so we have a variety of solutions, everything from a continuous feedback, so check-ins, one-on-ones, recognition, to goal setting, OKRs, goal planning, to engagement. We just actually acquired an incredible company called Amplify that has, I think, one of the best engagement solutions out there that we've now incorporated into our offerings. And so that's the technology, that's the software side of the house. But then there's 2 other aspects that make us pretty unique. Education. So we know that we can't just give people a tool and expect them to change all their behavior and their mindset. So we have a really robust education offering, both one-to-many courses, as well as more white glove consulting for manager training and enablement, OKR training, et cetera, et cetera. And then community, because we want to create more community for HR and for managers so that we can be on this journey of up-leveling together, because, the responsibilities and what's being asked of us in HR in 2021 is very different than what was being asked of us in 2011, let alone 2001 or 1991.
It's part of that, the engagement piece? Is that kind of where all this pressure is put on companies now, is engaging employees properly? Is that kind of the biggest piece of your product suite now, and just the interest of your potential customers, things like that?
Yeah. I mean, there's, I think that our own understanding of what does employee engagement really mean has evolved quite a bit. There's a lot of social science out there now that's showing what are the deeper human motivators, what are the drivers of engagement that we maybe weren't including in the biannual engagement surveys of yesterday. And so part of what we do is we mine the academic social science of human thriving and build that into our product. So we're deeply aligned with what the science says can actually help create highly engaged, high performing teams. And, people weren't ever measuring things like rest before as a part of their engagement surveys. And that's something we do. We can tell you, hey, are your employees approaching burnout? Do people feel like they can actually take time off and take a break to recharge? And I like to think of the engagement aspect. It's kind of like we're flying a plane, which is this company, and every good pilot has a lot of control panels that tells them information, their feedback loops about the environment and what they need to do to stay on course. And I think that I like to think that what we have is essentially the panel that gives you all the diagnostics of what's going on with all the systems with your people. And then also the remedy, the prescription to adjust course, to change things and dial it in.
Yeah. Shane, what's one of the more interesting tidbits maybe one of your clients has discovered from a feedback survey or something like that over the years? Does one come to mind?
Well, so Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, because I think that this whole conversation about the great recession, or the great turnover, and how do we keep our top performers, and all of these things, it comes down to communication. It comes down to, first of all, how not taking your people for granted, and then engaging in dialogue with them around what do they want and how are things going and what do they need to be successful and what are their ambitions in life. And if you can be in a more continuous conversation with your people around these things, you'll know if they're thinking about leaving. You'll know if you can actually provide them what they really want. And so I think that this great turnover is actually an incredible moment for HR to understand, hey, look, not all turnover is bad. Sometimes if somebody in your company is burnt out, and we've all just been through a heck of a 18 months.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's actually really going to be a positive win-win for both you, the company, as well as the individual, because sometimes we just need a fresh start. Sometimes we can't kind of turn the engine over in our current role.
Yeah.
And that's when I would say embrace the turnover as a positive thing, because that person's going to get a fresh start and you'll be able to hire somebody into your company that you're their fresh start. And so I don't think all turnover is bad. And B, if you can really get some of these disciplines in place around continuous feedback loops inside of your company, so that you're asking the right questions on a regular basis and you're having transparent, non-anonymous dialogue with employees and managers about critical topics. And then you do anonymous feedback. You get anonymous feedback, and that's the engagement surveys. So that at a global level, as the people leader, you can have that instrument panel, and then you can know where the squeaky wheels are. Where do we need to put extra attention? Who are the managers that are struggling to create engaged teams? We either need to coach this manager up, or we need to have a difficult conversation with that manager.
As we get prepared to go back to the workplace, a lot of companies are going hybrid. How is 15five preparing for hybrid work? And give me some thoughts around how you guys are handling this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So we've been preparing for hybrid work for 9 years because we started out as a remote first company. One of our original core values that we created was embrace freedom and flexibility. And when we started this company, we all knew that we wanted to build an extraordinary company with an iconic culture that changed the world of work. And we also didn't want to compromise our own lives. We wanted to be able to travel. We wanted to live where we wanted to live. And so from day one, we really built a hybrid culture. And it's kind of funny seeing everybody now catching up and trying to figure out, how do you build healthy culture in a hybrid model? And we've always thought of it as dynamic work models, because human beings are dynamic. And we have a lot of different facets to ourselves. There's the whole human being, and then there's also the professional. And I think what's happening, and just broadly speaking, is companies are being expected to embrace a wider spectrum of the whole human being than just the narrow professional slice. And so with a hybrid or a dynamic approach, it's really saying, in the majority of cases, we want to support you in living the life that you want to live. And in turn, we expect extraordinary performance. And so the hybrid model, there's a lot, and I think there's things that I take for granted just because we've been doing it for so long and have built a really strong culture with the 50% of the company in offices, 50% people fully remote, and then going fully remote for a little while. And now as we're returning to some of our offices, but it really comes down to giving people choice, treating them like adults, letting them set, if you want to work in an office, we have a couple of hubs that you can work out of. If you want to come in 2 days a week, you want to come in 4 days a week, you want to come in 0 days a week. You know your life better than anyone else. So what do you want?
Yeah. So you guys are giving each employee that kind of option?
Yes. We're making no mandates about people needing to come into even the people that are in the hubs, the places where we do have offices. We're not mandating that people need to be in there X number of days, Because you know what? The people that want to be in the office, they're going to be in the office, and that's where they're going to do their best work.
Yeah.
The people that have really found their flow and have really found, hey, this works for me to not commute. I get more time with my family. I can actually get more deep work done. Then great. Do your best work at home. You know, we a really big key to making hybrid culture work is getting together in person once or twice a year. And this is something that I really encourage everybody to do that's experimenting with hybrid approaches is create an annual company retreat, create department retreats. So that's what we do. Once a year, we bring everybody together in person for these incredible company retreats. And then every department once a year gets together with their own department. And, you know, there's a little bit of work involved and there's some money, but this is one of the best things you can do for retention and culture team building.
Yeah. Give me some other ways companies can keep their talent during this time. What kind of tips can you give me there?
So, okay. So first of all, don't take your people for granted. You know, in the kind of Netflix sports team analogy, where we're these world-class teams that are working together to win a championship. We're not families that it's just about unconditional love, but we're working together to actually achieve a certain goal. Don't take your people for granted. Make sure that you are listening to them, that you're understanding what are their drivers. And, you know, one of the best ways to do this that is just easy to do and very practical is to do what we call stay interviews. A lot of companies do exit interviews. You know, when somebody's out the door, tell us about your experience here. What could we have done better? Yada, yada, yada. And there's good data from that, but infinitely more valuable is identify the people you want to stay in your company and sit down with them. And it's best to do this with a manager, but HR can also perform these and sit down and go through a series of questions around saying, hey, like, first of all, Chris, thanks so much for choosing to work here at 15five. And we really value you. And we want to know what would have to be true for it to be a no-brainer for you to still be working here a year from today. And there's other various questions you can dig into, but it's essentially asking people, what would it take for you to stay? And then people can say, well, you know, I have been looking at the market and I could make a lot more money somewhere else for the same role, or I could probably get a better title. And I really care about titles. I'm really ambitious and I ultimately want to be a CEO or, you know, an executive one day. And I want to make sure that I'm making steady progress towards that. And then you get to have that conversation around, is that person demonstrating those competencies and is ready for a promotion? But you get to be in dialogue and actual, you know, on the same page, talking about the truth of what's the business want and what does the person want.
You know, some of these companies out there, I agree with you, first of all, but, you know, they're not used to having these conversations, Shane, right? Especially some of the leadership companies out there. I think for some of them, this is going to be kind of a rude awakening almost in terms of keeping their talent that they have. But what kind of you know, what do you see over the next year or so? Is this Resignation trend going to stay there? You know, what's kind of your crystal ball there?
Well, I mean, I think that the companies that aren't good at this are going to have a rude awakening, because if you aren't treating your people with respect, you're taking them for granted, you are thinking that the old kind of hierarchical, I'm the boss, do what I say
mentality,
my way or the highway, right? Butts in seat, like, you know, how we measure if our people are engaged and productive, well, they're in the office. Well, that is an archaic way of thinking that really came out of the Industrial Revolution, when people in a factory you could measure if they were being productive by them being present in the factory. It just doesn't work that way anymore for a lot of professions. And so what companies need to get good at is measuring productivity based on outcomes and results, and not just, oh, well, you know, Sally was in the office till she came in at 7 and left at 8. That means she's a high performer. That doesn't mean anything. that could be because they're just incredibly inefficient and they take a long time to do something that somebody else can do faster.
Yeah. I remember some years ago, it was Best Buy who started that ROW program, results oriented work environment, I think it was, where basically you didn't have hours, just you're assigned, you had a job and you figured out how to do that job.
Yeah.
Whether it was 3 hours a day or 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're kind of like trying to think of are we in like a remote revolution this period? I think maybe looking back, 10, 15, 20 years from now, this could be that turning point, I think maybe.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think COVID accelerated remote work by 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
And so I think that now it's about getting good because look, like not everybody is also yet good at remote work. And I think that's what we've learned. I mean, the people that have been doing remote work for a while watched all these noobs come in and all of a sudden they're working from home and they don't know how to set their own boundaries. That's why we saw people start working way more at home, is because it's like, oh my God, I've been operating from this paradigm where I need to always, I used to prove that I was a good employee by being in the office. Now I need to prove that I'm a good employee by constantly being on Slack and working to ungodly hours at night to prove that I'm not slacking off at home, because there's a fundamental lack of trust in that ecosystem.
Yep.
And so the people that are good at working remotely, they know what their objectives are. They know that they're out the results they're trying to deliver. And you know what, when it comes time for 5 or 6 o'clock, they know that it's okay to turn off Slack. They know that just by not being available immediately at all hours of the day doesn't mean that their boss is going to assume they're slackers.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot, like millions of people have been learning that lesson over the last 18 months.
Yep. You mentioned you get together once, twice a year there at 15five. What else can employers do to accommodate both remote and in-person employees, particularly when it comes to maintaining a culture at a company?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot more we can do to weave in human connection into our virtual interactions. And so this looks like, and again, culture, I think, really requires human connection. You can't just be in a transactional relationship with the other humans that we're collaborating virtually with. And it's easy to do that because virtual almost caters to it being, okay, well, let's just stick to the business. There's less of that kind of unstructured hangout. Hey, you want to go grab lunch? And all of a sudden I walked into an interesting conversation around the water cooler. And so there's a number of things that companies can do around this. One is, for the people that use Slack or something similar, Microsoft Teams, you can create really fun engagement on those channels. Like this morning, I was brewing my morning coffee and I was like, oh, I wonder how everyone else in the company makes their coffee. And so I then post in Slack in our water cooler channel, hey, how do you guys make your coffee? And there are hundreds of comments in there now. And people talking about, oh, we use our Chemex and I do, for pour overs, or before I had kids, I would take like 3 hours to do this elaborate ritual. And now I just use a crappy Walmart coffee maker. And, really fun, interesting conversations and seeing that insight into our unique experiences. We just did a step challenge as a company, which was really fun, through a company called Wellness Coach. And so we set up a step challenge and we broke into 10 teams and everybody was competing for first place. And so all of a sudden, we walked like 13 million steps collectively as a company in the 2 weeks.
Okay.
And so all of a sudden people are posting photos of their neighborhoods that they're taking walks in. And they're saying, hey, you know what, this one-on-one meeting, maybe we don't need to do it over Zoom. Maybe we should actually go for a walk together and just do audio, get off the camera. There's things like we have a weekly all hands meeting on Monday. And we do the first 5 minutes of that meeting is a gratitude exercise. And it's an opportunity to take a moment and think about the things that we're grateful for, the things that are going well, the things that are improving our lives, or just the progress we're making as a species. And it's beautiful because we all have a negativity bias. Our brains are hardwired to look for what's wrong. And so something like a gratitude practice at a company-wide level gets everybody thinking about what's right. And it actually changes the neurochemistry of the human beings in our company.
Very cool.
You can do meeting on ramps. So at the beginning of virtual meetings, just a quick check-in, and you can ask fun questions. What's your favorite plant? Or, what are you most excited about in life right now? And it just raises the energy and gets that moment for people to reveal a little bit of themselves.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things you can do like that weave a human culture into the day-to-day work experience.
It's making work more human, I think, right?
Yeah, right. Which is, and turns out we're all human.
Yeah, right. Funny thing. Shane, any advice for job seekers out there? What are you telling people like that when it comes to looking for work today? Because I know a lot of them are, I think a lot of them are taking stock of what they used to do, whether they got laid off or because of COVID, things like that. And that's a big reason why they're not going back to work in that same job, right? But what do you think?
Yeah, sure. So, I think that one of the best things that job seekers can do is build your own personal brand on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's an amazing resource. It really is. And there's tons of greenfield. And so be active on LinkedIn, share your thoughts, bring your own interesting ideas, perspectives to the table on LinkedIn so that you're a little more visible. That's one of the first things. And, another is that companies are hiring. There's a lot of great companies out there that are really looking for incredible people that are passionate, committed to the mission, looking for a fresh start, and are eager to bring on those people. So there's a lot of companies hiring. Yeah. That's one thing.
I think it might be the best time in history ever to search for a job. I would think. I can't think of another time where you had so many jobs, plus the fact that companies are really paying much more attention to their employees and their happiness.
Yes.
And so
that's absolutely. Well, and that's why I think that, where and who we work for is a really big deal.
Yeah.
It's going to impact our life almost more than any other decision that we make. And so take some time to do some deep thinking about this choice. What do you really want? What is your ideal culture? What's the vision for your career? Most people don't ever take the time to really think about these things, ask these questions. So that deeper introspection around what you really want, you might not get it immediately, but it can be a North Star that you orient your life to, and you can then navigate towards. Because there's more values-driven, mission-driven companies out there than ever before. And so by you connecting to your own vision and your own mission, you have a much higher chance to actually land yourself in a job where you're pinching yourself thinking, wow, this is the best job I've ever had.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to at least start with that intention of saying, I'm going to get the best job that I've ever had. There's no good reason to not start with that intention.
I want to ask about your job, Shane. How does one become a chief culture officer?
Yeah, you start a company and then you give yourself that title. Entrepreneurs are people who make their own business cards. Yeah, I'm the founder. Okay. I'm the founder of 15five.
Gotcha.
There's 3 of us.
So what was your previous job before that?
Yeah, so I started out running customer success. I ran customer success for 6 years at 15five, and it was great, and I loved it. And getting that hands-on experience of scaling a team, of being obsessed with our customers' results, really great. But 6 years, I was starting to feel burnt out. I was starting to feel, hey, I know that I could hire somebody that would be better at this, first of all. And when I look at what do I really want, where are my strengths? What are the things that energize me and that are aligned with my passions? It's always been culture. I was always building the 15five culture from day one. And, I got a ton of permission from my co-founder to just guinea pig and do weird things and break the mold. And so I'd already been kind of acting as our unofficial chief culture officer. And so then it was kind of the opportunity. I realized, oh, wow, I don't have to keep running customer success. I could get somebody that would do a better job at it than me. And what I really want to do is be doing the culture stuff full time. And, we have a broad definition of culture. So culture it heavily impacts performance and engagement and business results. And it's not just, happy hours and retreats.
Yeah.
So
what's a day in the life like, Shane? Give me a typical day for you.
yeah, sure. Day in the life, wake up with my little kid my girl wakes me up in ungodly hours in the morning, and then make some coffee, do some breath work, and maybe go for a run. My first meeting, I try to do morning pages in the morning to just get my thoughts clear. And then the work day looks like meeting with my people operations team, collaborating on a variety of the kind of core HR, people ops functions. How do we up-level our talent, put attention on DEI programs, thinking about how do we, what's the performance of the executive team, which recruiters are we going to be working for? Then thinking about, we've got a couple of retreats coming up. And so picking venues, and, one of the best parts of my job is when I have to go scout locations for company retreats. And so like we're likely going to take everybody to Italy next year. So I might have to, horribly go to Italy and scout locations. That's definitely the best part of my job. To having tough conversations with managers and giving feedback around things that aren't working, analyzing our engagement results, understanding who are the managers that are excelling, who are the managers that are struggling, what new programs do we need to put in place, who are we going to fire, who are we going to hire, how do we equip our managers to make a lot of those decisions on their own, to leadership meeting and discussing companies, product strategy, to hopping on a podcast. And then, after this, going to probably be doing some more, I'm deep in our engagement results. I'm looking at the instrument panel right now and really thinking about what levers do we need to adjust to make next quarter exceptional.
Yeah. And how much of that culture is put into your recruiting effort, as far as how your recruiters go out there and pitch candidates? Give me a sense of how that, affects the overall recruiting temp.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the culture is the recruiting process. So having a good employer brand is really good. So Glassdoor is important, but also just your actual brand, like the brand marketing you're doing in the world, is also going to be the employer brand. Because one definition I've heard of culture is the level of pride that people feel in working for your company. Like when Uber was going through getting dragged through the mud for good reasons, nobody was going to a party and saying, "Oh yeah, I work at Uber."
Right.
And they're like, yeah, I work car ride sharing company. And so by building a winning, first of all, you need to be winning as a company, straight up. That's just table stakes for a healthy culture. But infusing culture into the recruiting process, you should be very transparent about what it's actually like to work here. And ideally, you're actually a little polarizing. You should have documents and clarity of what it's like to actually work at a company like 15five, that either people are saying, "Oh my God, that's what I've always dreamed of. I need to be there." And you should have people saying, "Whoa, that sounds horrible. I would never want to talk about my personal life and share stories from my childhood and how I make my coffee. Like, I want work to be work." And so you should be pushing some people away and drawing some people in.
Nice. It's been an interesting conversation, Shane. Last question for you is, tell everyone where to go learn more. And then also, what's the deal with the name?
Okay. So go to 15five.com. That is 15five.com. And the name and the part of our cool origin story of our company is that Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, along with Doug Tompkins, the founder of North Face, and this guy, Paul Hawken from Smith & Hawken, back in the 80s, they actually came up with this management practice called 515s. And what that was is that once a week, you'd have each person in your company answer a couple of questions. It would take them no more than 15 minutes to write, and then 5 minutes for the manager to review. So in a very short order, you get a snapshot of an insight into the inner workings of your people. And so we heard about this and we adapted it, and we actually came up with 15five as a placeholder name, and then it stuck. And of course, we've evolved beyond just the check-in. So it's more a little bit of a 7-Eleven kind of story here.
Gotcha. No, I like
7-Eleven used to be open from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. and then they went 24 hours. And so it's no longer a literal meaning, but it is the symbolic meaning of, for 15five at least, it's high efficiency, lightweight feedback loops that can help unlock your team's potential.
Awesome. Well, Shane, it was great catching up today, and good to meet you. And thanks for joining us here on RecTech.
Chris, thanks so much.
Excellent. Well, that will do for this episode of the RecTech Podcast. Be sure to follow us on the socials, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn via the @RecTech Media handle to see every podcast, video, and blog we publish. Thanks for listening and watching, everybody. And remember, always be recruiting.